Hey, hello everybody. Are you ready for Shally's Alley? You are live on Shally's Alley, and today's guest is, really far away. Let me frame it this way. It would take you 36 hours in an airplane to get there if you started where I am. Aubrey Blanche is coming to us from all the way on the other side of the planet, from down under in Sydney, Australia. I used to live in Sydney, by the way. I don't know if I told you that.
Oh, amazing. Well, for folks who don't know, I'm originally from Michigan, and I just
That's okay. We won't hold you like that.
I'm a Midwesterner at heart. But yeah, I moved to Sydney because
for Atlassian, yeah, you said that.
Yeah, well, so I worked at Atlassian, and then I moved over to Culture Ramp, and I decided to go to Australia. I think I've worked in Australian tech for a long time, but also like the fascism in the US was not my thing. And so I got out while I could.
Yeah, that was apparently just in time too. So
yeah, absolutely. But I still, I'm really lucky that I still work with orgs in the US and in Australia. And what I do, now is AI ethics. But what I'm really passionate about, in addition to helping small organizations adopt it really responsibly, is a lot of my training time is actually with folks in HR and talent acquisition and DEI, thinking about how to think about AI ethics within their sphere. And so that's why I was so excited to chat to you with the work your team does.
Imagine my surprise when I was looking for, people to invite to the show, and I came across your content, and I'm like, wow, I'm the only one that I know of that actually talks about the ethics of AI in talent acquisition. And I do presentations and ask questions about who's doing what and who's got policies, and everybody just looks like deer in the headlights. So I was super excited to have you on the show for that. I mean, AI is not coming soon. It's like already here. The problem is we are not leading the change. It's leading us. And that's creating a bunch of, let's just say opportunities for problems that are going to come down in the future. So really, really, really excited to ask you some questions, very specific questions about, your views and your practices and how you recommend that we handle this. Because I'm tired of being the only one that talks about this. I'm tired of being the only one that preaches ethics in AI and have people look at me and go, "Are you an attorney?" No, I'm an ethicist.
No,
those are very different.
I just care about humans. Well, I think to kind of I want to kind of describe what I'm seeing is happening, and you can tell me if you're a little bit closer. But what I see, and we talked about this in my episode of The Babes, which is my podcast on AI and HR, is that right now, kind of talent and HR folks are getting pressured to adopt AI. And the underlying reason for that, I think it's really important to name, is that because people who are already very rich running frontier AI labs need you to think that you have to use this technology in order to justify the amount of money in their bank account. So what is happening is that their product marketing departments are putting out ideas about AI being efficient, about AI creating revenue, about it creating business value. The empirical evidence for the implementation of these technologies in the way it's generally done is very thin to non-existent. So I'm putting all that out there to say there are a lot of corporate executives who believe product marketing taglines and are confusing that for a business strategy. And TA and HR people are kind of holding the bag, and that they're being told from up on high they have to adopt it.
They have to do it.
They're not being given the time or the training to do it responsibly and legally.
Yep.
So I want to name that because everybody that I talk to, my clients, kind of is feeling a bit overwhelmed. And at least in my experience, folks who go into recruiting or, HR, they care about people, and they're not being given the tools that they need to implement this technology in a way that actually achieves their values and their intentions with their work. And so I just want to name that if you're feeling that way, it's not just you, but also just because this is being done poorly doesn't mean it has to be done poorly. So
no, absolutely not. It does not have to be done poorly. And there are benefits to it, and it can be done ethically and with care, and it can actually help you. But
totally,
when you just say, I'm gonna like slap a little AI on that, sprinkle some AI on top, like that's what a lot of times I see out there, and you're absolutely right. In fact, have you ever heard of enshittification?
yeah. I'm actually interviewing Cory Doctorow in August for the Festival of Dangerous Ideas.
Awesome. So he I don't know when he wrote this, but he just posted, I think 4 days ago, this scathing deep dive in his usual way, right? Where he basically, and hold on to this thought for just a second. He basically compares exactly what you said. He compares AI to Amway. He's pretty much saying that AI is a giant Ponzi scheme, like a pyramid scheme, like, literally what you just described, all these, rich tech bros saying, oh, look how cool, it's going to help you with this and that and the other. And people are just buying it, gobbling it up because it's there. Now, it's really not that revolutionary, but it is an improvement on technology, just like a lot of other things. And he just comes out and like basically just steamrolls over that and says, a lot of this stuff is just people making money, and that's literally all it is, which is exactly what you said.
Totally. And I want to, something that we talk about. So for folks who don't know, in addition to, I started writing about AI and HR back in 2017, and everyone was like, oh, this is very niche. No one cares about that. And it turns out
I still feel that way. I mean, seriously.
I have terrible timing. But
I feel that way. It's 10 years later and it's the same thing.
What you're talking about is frontier generative AI, not AI as a technology. So
that's what he was talking about, right?
Totally. But I think that's important because AI is actually a marketing term, not a technical one.
100%.
And so a lot of what I really believe is that I'm very excited about small, narrow AI, about small language models. Most of the things that you want to do with AI can be done with small models on your local machine or on a local server. But it does not suit the billions of dollars of VC funding that's gone into frontier labs for you to use that instead of things like Claude. Now,
if you can run it on your Mac Mini and for $500 that you paid for $500, it's not making anybody any money, and it's not increasing, the usage day by day and stuff like that. But you're 100% right. So like what we call AI right now, these large language models and generative AI, is really not actually artificial intelligence or anywhere near that. But there's a lot of talk about how, well, there's different kinds of AI, and there's generative AI, and then there's general AI. And I'm like, look, we are nowhere close actual machine-based intelligence in the form of like human thought and semantic knowledge. We're nowhere close. But everybody calls it AI. And so, it's kind of become, like you said marketing term, I think is what you said. Or
AI. Like it's a term that means whatever the person using it wants it to
exactly.
mean. They may also want it to mean something to you that they don't mean. So like, again, I think it's just really important that we get specific that like most of the things you're doing, you don't need a frontier AI model for. Again, I also want to be transparent. I do use Claude every day.
I use Claude every day too, but for very
acknowledging
specific reasons. Yeah.
I'm on my own journey. I'm learning to program local AI so that I can start moving my workflows onto my own server. But like, I want to be clear with folks that I'm not saying this as like an ethicist who's resolved all of the tensions and difficulties with using this technology. I can't.
Yeah, that would be kind of hard.
Totally. But I offer that because I think it's really easy. Like there's a lot of folks I see who are ethicists in this space who are basically making it a binary concern, or they're shaming people for using AI. And I personally
it's like the fear factor or whatever. Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. So to be clear, what I see, my definition of it is a technology that helps me automate things that used to take me a lot more work and effort. So for example, before AI, which sidebar, what we currently know as AI started in the 1400s or something like that, with looms and sewing and machines that did that kind of stuff. Punch cards in World War II time period, that's still the same technology. But for me, it means easier automation. So I was working on a lot of Power Automate stuff, And it's clunky. It was difficult to work on. You had to have different, permissions, and you had to be able to read HTML and connect. So it was possible to do some pretty amazing automations, but it wasn't at the click of a button. So what this has done is it's made it a lot easier, like you said, to learn how to do coding and do it yourself. So to me, AI is a general term for technology that helps me automate and offload some of the menial tasks that don't require a whole lot of, let's just say, human intelligence to really do. So
yeah, and I think that's important in that one of the things that I teach, and we should get into kind of the difference between law and ethics and why they're both important.
Yes, please explain why an ethicist is not a lawyer or vice versa.
Yes, although you have to know a lot about the law to be an ethicist. So I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about kind of the human piece. But so the law kind of sets what I would call minimum guardrails for like how you can use this technology. Now, why that matters, obviously, as an ethicist, someone who teaches, talent and HR professionals a lot of the time, is that almost every client that comes to me is breaking the law when they come to me. Yeah. And like, number one thing, I keep saying this, I'm like, don't fucking put resumes in ChatGPT. Stop doing it. There are multiple reasons. One, privacy laws in most jurisdictions say that you can't without disclosing that as a third-party processor of private information, right. Especially not your free ChatGPT account. Number two.
Right, especially that. Yep. And especially a resume that was sent to you. Like, very different to, process a page of internet data, like a LinkedIn profile that has been indexed by Google and is publicly accessible to anybody. That's one thing, but a resume that was emailed to you privately is a private document.
Is a private piece of data. And so knowing that you can't do that, number one. But then number two, also, if you're using, say, ChatGPT to do keyword matching or ranking, there are live cases in California that are suggesting that products that do this actually qualify for liability under basically consumer financial protection law, because it would qualify as like an unregulated financial report. And so I know that sounds really nerdy, but that's an example of where executives are going automate, and TA is doing their best under pressure to do that, but they're opening up enormous liability windows. And a thing that I'm seeing from executives is there's a lot of executives who go, oh, AI hasn't been regulated, so we can keep going. But the reality is the backlash regulation is coming very quickly, like quite frankly, quicker than I anticipated. Right. And so like TA professionals are really on the front lines of making sure that you're not doing a bunch of illegal shit that your company's going to get sued for, number one.
So to be clear, what that means is for the, quote unquote, uninitiated, that means that if you are, for example, ranking, using an automated algorithm to rank and make a decision about whether or not someone moves forward in the process. So this AI is, whatever you want to call it, whatever, this technology is processing applications and deciding these 10 people are going to move forward. If you're doing that, you're basically exercising judgment on those profiles, and you're not doing it yourself. Something else is doing that, and whatever that is needs to be accountable for all the same laws and reasons in every country that recruiters need to be accountable. Diversity and what you are allowed to ask and not ask varies from country to country. Like in Germany, for example, you can't ask about education and college degrees, and to an American, that'd be like, what do you mean? We always ask that, right? So it varies, but the fact that you have an AI that's determining this inside of a black box automated system is already crossing the line. And so it doesn't matter if there was no regulation today, because tomorrow when the lawsuits come and the audits come, it's already been done and the damage already happened. And we already have the data that we weren't supposed to have. Like, for example, one of the things I like to call out is, and I'm sure you have quite a few thoughts on this, is when you have bias that is surfaced by intersection of data. It's called intersectional bias. I know you know that, but for the people that are listening. And this is something that people don't really think about. Intersectional bias is when there are multiple factors that interact that lead to compounded adverse action or adverse impact on an applicant that a human probably can't even detect because the machine is detecting all these different vectors. So it'd be pretty obvious if you said, hey, is it legal to discriminate against women? Okay, that's pretty obvious. But what if you combined 5 different things that were not necessarily obvious, race, gender, but socioeconomic, educational, all these other things, and you put them together? That pattern is learned by these systems, and it's applied over and over and over again, and everybody is being colored with this intersectional bias.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also want to point out that, especially for folks in the US, where I think that's where a lot of your listeners are, is that, the federal government, at least 2. Well, the
Right.
federal government is rolling back a lot of protective regulation, especially around protected classes. So there's, a memo coming from the EEOC. They want to get rid of the disparate impact test, for example. And so this is why I think it's really important to differentiate the law from ethics.
Right.
The example that I always use is
exactly. That's where we're going with this.
It was legal to own Black people.
Right. And that's law versus ethics.
That was never acceptable. And so, like, understanding
that's law versus legal doesn't mean ethical. And sometimes ethical doesn't necessarily mean legal. Attorneys are sometimes have to make unethical choices because of the requirement to provide a vigorous defense for their client. And it's the best defense, but it might be crossing an ethical boundary. They're not supposed to, but they can.
Well, you could also argue that everyone's entitled to a good defense. And so I think it's important to say that I find that ethicists who think in binaries are not good ones. That ethics is actually a decision-making process when weighing complicated inputs to critical issues. And so ethics, I think, is important, especially for folks in TA that are working in the US, because you're going to be put in a place where there are people who are going to tell you that you can do this because it's legal, but you might still be violating.
Or it's not illegal.
And so I want to note that there are different things, but what I would say is you are responsible for the choices that you make.
Yep.
And that includes the technology that you implement, even under pressure. And so I want to encourage folks to step into that responsibility in a really good way, because you have the opportunity to do this really well. Now, I want to talk about some of the benefits of ethics, because from a TA perspective. So there's some folks who I think do this really well. Like, if you don't follow Bonnie Dilber at Zapier, I would say everyone really should. Something about her work that I really love. So she's incredibly AI forward in the way that she talks about recruiting, but she's constantly thinking about the responsibility and ethical angle in the context of what she's doing operationally. And so I think it's such a great model of how someone can be, she would never call herself an ethicist, but she takes from all of her content that I see such a high level of responsibility that I think that's something we can all collectively agree to, which is be aware of people's privacy rights, be aware of the way the technology works. And one of the biggest things that they do is, I was quite skeptical of this, I will admit, is they do AI interviews. And I was like, people are going to hate that. And I've seen a bunch of other recruiters say we have really high opt-out rates. But I think one of the differences in the way that they do it is they're actually very upfront in their disclosures about here's what's happening, here's the technology we're using, here's why we're using it, and why we think it actually benefits you as a candidate. And some of it is that it allows them to collect more data from more people than they would be able to if it was just a recruiter doing a screen. But they actually have quite high opt-in rates from what I've heard. And so I want to note that I'm not telling you not to use the technology, but do it in a way that treats people with respect and gives them control over how they're treated and when they interact with technology. What I would also say is that more and more global regulations are pointing towards mandatory opt-outs for AI interactions, meaning that anything that you're implementing, you should always be in parallel building a process for candidates to opt out of AI-based screening, because it would be a good bet that regulation for that is coming soon. And if you prepare for it ahead of time, the regulation, you're already compliant. Again, that's a trust building exercise with candidates. So,
but isn't that like just minimum requirements? I mean, seriously, like, shouldn't you have, I've been in this business for 30 years. And I remember when some companies I was working with moved from pencil and paper to computer applications, right? And we ran into all kinds of issues with that, where people couldn't apply with a computer because they didn't have one, or they didn't know how to use one, or et cetera, et cetera. So like, shouldn't there always be an opt out? If you make it so that everybody has to do something a certain way, isn't that just, that doesn't matter whether it's AI or whatever, but if you force people into you have to do it this way, you're already kind of begging for trouble, right?
I think so. But again, I think these are things that folks haven't historically done that are even more critical in the age of AI. And so for me, a lot of the things, back in 2020 when DEI was cool, all
Right.
of,
It was still trending.
when white people read 6 books and then forgot about it. Like all of those things still apply in this world. And so that's kind of the other message that I have for TA professionals is I get that it may feel overwhelming, that things may be happening really fast, and they are, but also a lot of the basic skills that you have around creating great candidate experiences, around considering candidates from marginalized backgrounds, like all of that knowledge still
like
really applies to this technology. And so I would say on average, you are probably less unprepared than you feel.
Okay. Because I see, because you're saying you're aware of that. You went through these, changes and considerations when we were dealing with people from disparate backgrounds and so on. I get what you're saying. So basically you're saying extend that logic. It's the same algorithm. It's the same idea. It's still being fair. It's being fair. It's being inclusive. It doesn't matter if your definition of diversity is X, Y, or Z. Being inclusive is still the right option, right?
Yeah. And so like, as an example, when we talk about bias in HR, because I find like 18 months ago, it was that folks didn't even realize the bias was baked into the models. We are past that point, which is really exciting. But now we are at the point where I'm seeing, some HR tech companies that I consult with are getting questions, like vendor questions from their prospects saying like, talk about bias or whatever. So I love that we've gone from not knowing about it to having a vendor checklist. What I find is the customers actually don't know the right answers to the questions they're asking.
So, but everybody says they're using AI responsibly. What's the biggest lie then in that? What's the lie that people are telling themselves about ethical AI?
There's a study I just read.
Maybe not the biggest, but give me the top.
No. Like, so the thing is, like, people using AI. This was a study on college students, but I think it's useful here. Is that the more they used AI, the more they felt ethically convicted that the way they were doing it was correct. And it didn't actually have to do with the level of ethical deliberation they were doing. It had to do with the amount they used the technology. They just like justified their own choices in ethical terms.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally. But I think there's a couple of layers of it. One, and again, I would also really encourage folks to follow Martin Redstone at Warden AI. So they do really good auditing work, but his work, I think he's the best person to follow in the world on kind of regulatory compliance with AI for HR and TA folks. But what he showed in a report that he shared a little while ago was that a huge proportion of vendors in HR technology are not disclosing the underlying models as data sub-processors in their vendor.
Sometimes they don't even know. Like they're using.
They might not know.
Yeah.
Someone at the company,
always,
let me be clear. There is an engineer who knows that they wrapped a foundation model. Like the knowledge is not absent in the
somebody
company.
knows. Right.
But it's possible that there's a disconnect between the engineering team and the legal team or the sales team or whatever. And so number one, is TA professionals need to actually ask specific questions about, are you using a foundational model? Is this a custom model? Like actually understand, did you just build something on top of Anthropic or not? I'm not judging. I'm just saying, some people build custom models, some build on top of foundational models. So you need to be really careful about data processing and privacy. And I would say, given that study, you should not just trust the agreement. You should ask specific questions. In terms of bias, you need to ask about what auditing is done. You also need to ask about the provenance of the data sets used to train the model. You also need to understand what escalation procedures exist if bias manifests within your kind of instance, and then also what redress processes and procedures exist.
So I think redress for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason people say that like, oh, we're doing responsible AI is because they don't actually know, like they genuinely believe it. Like I don't think most people are lying. I think most people are good and they want to do the right thing.
They were looking into it and they thought that they were doing the right thing, but they didn't realize
Totally, but they don't know what it requires. And so I would say, if folks, want a useful framework, I'm happy to send you a link to it. But the framework that I've produced is called Ethical by Design, and that's through the Ethics Center, the nonprofit I work at. But it's basically 8 principles for building good technology with kind of operationalizing. And there's a lot for TA professionals to look at and say, check, does my use of this tech meet these standards? But the other thing to know about bias is that
is it like minimum requirements and then like, okay, you pass and then there's like, you're doing really well and there's like, you're doing great.
Coming soon. This is kind of the foundational IP. But in terms of bias, so there's certainly like vendor audits. And like procurement questions and vendor audits. But then you also need to think about if they're training on your data, what bias is embedded in the data in your organization.
You already your data.
Like, we talk about Amazon in this kind of famous story where they built their own resume parser and then it started rejecting women because Amazon historically rejected women. And I think a lot of people like laugh at that and say, of course, but it's like there are so many companies that didn't make headlines that have used tools that did the same thing. And it doesn't require data about a particular gender, et cetera, for it to work. So there are
intersectional bias. You may not even have gender data called out in your database, although it may be there, but it's picking up on these criteria that actually are making that determination. So it's not doing it. The AI is not saying these are women. It's just putting together this criteria and deciding about this group of people, and it happens to be that they're in that group. So it's exactly right. It's not necessarily intentional. It's not like these tools are out there going, haha, we'll show them, we're gonna make, it's almost always it's either accidental or after the fact, like we discovered it, and at that point the damage is already done, like we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to kind of pivot into responsible adoption. I think you can program AI to do things differently. So for example, if you're vibe coding something, which probably not in TA, like the security requirements for the private data that you're processing are really intense, lovable, has a lot of security issues with it. Like you probably, for most organizations, cannot vibe code your entire HR tech stack. Like, I just want to put it, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it is unlikely that you are qualified to do that in a way that is legally compliant, let alone ethical.
I'm building it right now in-house, and I'm using an on-prem model for that reason. So nothing ever leaves our data set. Because we, even though I have, a model that is external that we've cleared, that we are using, that is explainable and everything else, it's still sending the information, even though we take every step to remove it. So it's just better to keep it in-house. And that's very difficult to do. It's not like you can vibe, like you said, you can vibe code an app that runs on a website, but when you're providing other people's data, right there, you have like this, that's the gate that you have to pass. You have this violation of privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I talk about responsible adoption, one of the other things is I say this over and over again, productivity and efficiency are not legitimate objectives.
It's not a good excuse, but it's so much faster.
Like they're just not good objectives. And the reason is because they incentivize all of the bullshit that makes people hate AI. So Productivity as an objective tells everyone, make more stuff.
Make more stuff. Oh, I see what you mean. Make more stuff.
Like, make more stuff. Okay, why? When we talk about like GDP is a productivity indicator, like digging a hole in is productivity. And so, like, instead, if we talk about an objective that says, to create an excellent candidate experience or to improve our quality of hire or something that is actually an objective that meets a business goal or respects that humans are not instruments, what we get is the idea that efficiency or productivity may be tactics in the toolbox to achieve that objective. Like making something more efficient might be the correct thing to do for a particular problem, but making everything more efficient is almost never a good outcome.
Right.
And the reason is because one,
just doing stupid faster.
Right. Yeah. Like making a broken process faster does not actually
worse
produce
faster.
outcomes.
Exactly.
Or, it's like everyone hates like reading AI slop. Okay, well, if you're productive, you're like, look, I've created 6 more artifacts. Great. Now someone is getting AI brain fry having to read the bullshit that you put out that someone didn't read. And it turns out that like that slide deck doesn't actually drive forward the business. It doesn't help humans make better decisions. And so sometimes create another artifact is the correct thing to solve a real problem, but it is not always. And so when we choose objectives about business value or candidate experience, what we create and incentivize is that each of us adopting AI actually do the critical thinking work first to ask the question, is AI the right tool for this problem?
Because I would go back before that. I would say, is this an enhancement? Are we enhancing our experience, our efficiency, our availability? Are we broadening our talent pool? Like, is this an improvement, or are we just doing it just, like you said, because we're being told to do? That would
totally. And I think right now what's happening is that the frontier labs are depending on people not using their critical thinking to justify their valuations. And so one of the ways that you can push back, and let me be clear, I'm super pro like conscientious objection and just opting out of AI altogether. Like I think that's a choice we should respect for folks. It's not my lane. As an AI ethicist, I play with AI all the time because I don't think I can advise on technology.
I don't know how to use it.
But I do think principled refusal is a totally legitimate approach to this, noting that women tend to do that more than men. And remember, women are often talked about why they don't adopt AI, and I prefer to ask why men recklessly adopt a technology that has known harms. But yeah, I just is asking better questions, starting with like, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve? Is it again, better, higher? Is it all that? One, is AI the right tool to help us solve this particular problem?
Decide that first. Exactly.
It might be, but it might not. And then,
but you have to make that decision instead of just blindly applying it. That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah.
And then what guardrails do we need to put in place? Which is like, if you don't have a policy.
Okay, well, back up though, because I think that's something where I see a lot of glazed eyes in the audience when I talk about guardrails. So why don't you take a double click on that a little bit and say, okay, what guardrails? Explain guardrails.
Yeah, so when we talk about guardrails, it's basically just the limits of what the AI is allowed to do, and that will consider both legal and ethical considerations. So for example, one of kind of the most common guardrails that we talk about for AI-assisted decision-making is the human in the loop. Oh, there's a human in the loop. All that means is that a human is taking something from an AI and making a decision. Now, the challenge with that is that we know that human beings, one, are subject to automation bias. So like we tend to just trust stuff that comes from machines, regardless of how well it's done. But then also often that when we're automating for efficiency, we're asking the human in the loop to make more decisions than they physically can process in a particular amount of time. And so sometimes, a lot of times when there's kind of an efficiency-based objective, you create the point of view where humans are like there in the sense that they're pushing a button or they're approving, but there's actually no time for them to do the deliberation that's necessary. And again, I believe it's Colorado is actually introducing legislative standards around what training and like adjudication is required to satisfy the legal definition of like a human in the loop or like a human being properly.
What does that actually mean? Right.
And
doesn't mean just a pair of eyeballs looking at it going, oh, this looks great.
Right. And so, or in TA, we often talk a lot about explainability guardrails. So for example, if an AI says, these are your top 20 candidates, the AI actually needs to be able to tell you how it constructed that list. But again, going back to, you can decide and should be able to guide the AI to give it a logic about how to look for that. So you, for example, can choose whether you want to see only people with super traditional resumes and really linear careers, I want to be honest, I don't know why you would ever want to do that, but people do
But
it.
what you're saying is you get to make you can make you can create the rubric. I call that a rubric.
Yes.
You can make the rubric that the AI uses to. So let the AI do the power play of actually processing the information, but given your guidance,
Yeah,
opposed to just letting it determine how to make that decision. Yeah.
But so I just offer that a guardrail would be something like really intentional programming of the selection logic underneath it. It would be that it has a function to explain how it arrived at a decision that it recommended that you then approve.
So explainability, transparency, those
totally
are examples of
but
guardrails.
Also things that
limits
are not
on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, but I would say that, something that I'm talking to my clients about is also one, like, what is the limits of the number of decisions that someone has to adjudicate an hour? Like, so decisions per hour. And then the second thing is kind of cost modeling. And I know this is not something, but like there's a lot of executives who are like, oh, we can have less recruiters. We're going to save so much money on headcount because of this. But the reality is if you're relying on frontier AI, it's artificially subsidized right now. It's going to get much, much more expensive, especially as these labs go public, if they make it to the public markets. And so you need to be considering, like I saw this meme on Threads the other day. It was like an engineer who's like, yeah, we've started hiring interns to like code basic things because we don't want to waste the token costs on like routine coding. And I'm like, great. Okay. So the tech bros reinvented employees. Fantastic. But I think that's something to consider is if you rebuild your entire recruiting process with AI and then the cost of the AI goes up by 5x, which is probably not insane given that my co-host on my podcast told me that some estimates put that the frontier labs are burning 27 times as much money to service their customers as they're bringing in from their customers. And so if you're not planning for a 5x increase in your AI costs over the next 3 years, like you need to think about that, because what I'm seeing is that people automate with AI and then they are starting to cut roles or not hire roles. But then they have vendor lock-in. They may not be able to afford, and a lack of institutional knowledge about how to do things in a human way.
And now they don't know how to do it themselves. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a very classic Silicon Valley kind of economic play. It's how Uber played out. So if you don't know the history of Uber, they basically VCs gave them a bunch of money so they could run the business at a loss to drive the taxis out of business. Once the taxis were gone, prices went up on average 94%. And so
not only that, they also basically trained an entire population of teens that learned not to drive. And so now they're dependent, because a lot of kids, my kids' age, don't drive because they're so used to just, it's an Uber here and Uber there, but they don't drive. And that was created by that. It's a dependency. Anyway, but we're far off topic for me.
No. I think it is AI, and I'm mindful that we're at the top of the hour, and I've got to jump off for some much less interesting things. But yeah, I think what I would say is like my advice for, and obviously folks can call me if they want, but really is challenge the narrative that you must adopt AI. Ask why. Ask for what purpose, because there are incredible uses of this technology. And I think for folks that want to go in a Google hole, start looking at small AI, narrow AI, local AI, small language models, getting away from confusing all of AI, which is an incredibly broad suite of technologies, for frontier lab chatbots. That is one tiny slice of kind of the AI spectrum that eats up most of the money and media time. And so I think the most powerful thing that anyone can do is just read about it. I will also say, if folks are interested in issues of kind of AI and power and organizations, I have a newsletter, so I will curate my feed for you and give you analysis if you don't have time to do it yourself.
I think especially when it comes to AI, you need a little bit of knowledge to be able to curate effectively.
Totally. And so that's what I'm trying to do is like, I pick the few things I read this week that are most interesting, but I would say don't believe the hype. The hype is highly motivated by folks' economic interests, and the economic interests aren't yours. But there is really cool stuff to do. And the more knowledge that you have, the more power you have to use it ethically to actually, I really, really think that engaging with this technology ethically, especially with the level of backlash that is ongoing and coming, means that leading ethics first is actually going to be what's going to make a business resilient.
Yes, so it's going to be a definite competitive advantage because you won't be the ones that have the flip switched off. Because
totally.
Yep, exactly.
And so that's what I would say to folks is I understand that it's not the trendy thing right now, kind of in the C-suite, but that you can lead the way, and being able to tell the story that's both ethical, that's about risk management, and is about business resilience. I think giving yourself the knowledge to push back and not just make the moral case, but to understand the organization.
It's not just a moral decision, it's actually a business practice. Yeah, totally. That's really good. Before you go, I know you said you had to run, but I wanted to close out today with this question and put your like crystal ball futurist hat on. And can you come up with 10 years from now, what is going to be the recruiting equivalent of, oh my God, I can't believe we used to do that when it comes to AI?
Oh my gosh, I really think it is putting resumes in your free ChatGPT account.
Okay, yeah, that's probably
like, I think people are going to look back and they'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Yeah. And what I would say is like two things.
Good one.
One, if you're listening and you've done that, give yourself a little grace.
And then just stop doing it right now.
Right.
It's okay. Just stop.
You know, like when you know better, you do better. Now you know.
Now you better. Stop.
But then also, I think ignorance is not an excuse. In the sense that you have the power, like Google is free. Like I said, I've given you 2 people during this podcast to follow. You can follow me if you want, but those people are amazing. Is just in whatever way you're already getting information. So don't add something to your to-do.
Let's start asking about this.
Make your media ecosystem something that helps you think critically about this. I think that's a really powerful thing to do. So it's just put it in your ambient flow of information throughout the day.
Brilliant.
And yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. That's a really, really good way to wrap up. Well, thank you so much for being with us from across the planet. And you know, my 2 American friends appreciate it, and my 1 Australian fan probably appreciates it too.
I love it. So. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for letting me chat. And I hope
awesome. Lots of fun.
Everyone who listened, you can find me on LinkedIn or AubreyBlanche.com.
I'm definitely signing off for the newsletter because I don't have time to read everything about AI, and so I'm there to learn. Awesome. Thanks so much, Aubrey. Take care. Bye-bye.